I am making the chickpea and lentil soup, lentil and chickpea soup, on page 49 of the Food and Feasts of Jesus book. And it looks pretty cool. I ran into some snags right away, of course, but I'm just going to get started with that. All right. It calls for a cup of lentils and 2 cups of chickpeas that you've already soaked overnight, and then changed the water in the morning, and then boiled for an hour. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. Here is what 1 cup of chickpeas looks like after being soaked overnight and boiled for an hour with a bay leaf or 2. It looks like it's about 3 cups of chickpeas. And also the recipe after that says to put it all together in your stew pot and cook for 4 more hours. Now I know a chickpea has been often mistaken for a little tiny paving stone, but these have been sitting on the back of the stove. They're cool enough now, and they are actually soft enough to eat, which means if they cook, they're edible at this point. You could surprise me with just the overnight soaking and the 1 hour of bringing it to a boil and letting it simmer covered for an hour. So I was really worried that these would be like little stones, so I already opened a can of 21st century chickpeas, which is what I think I'm going to use for this stew. This is my soba pot, and this is a really ancient way to cook. It's a thin clay pot with a lid, and it would probably be sat in embers and just cooked gently. The reason I like the soba pot is I can put all my ingredients in here after I've sauteed whatever I need to saute, and then pop it in a 350-degree oven for an hour, and nothing is going to burn, nothing is going to scorch. It's a real nice, gentle way to cook a stew or a soup. So that's what I'm going to use for this. And now back to the cutting board. We need to cut up 1 onion and 2 cloves of garlic, which we're going to saute. And they say to throw in the spices, and it's half of the spices that are in our regional spice mix, but this I actually mixed up. Instead of 1 tablespoon of each of the 8 spices, I used 1 teaspoon of each of the 8 spices because I couldn't imagine having 8 tablespoons full of this regional spice. So if I mix this up and use it all up, I'll just make some more because it smells really good. And that's in the book also. Now I'm going to crush my garlic to get the paper off of it, and then chop that up. And I'm going to put this one I smashed already. So I'm thinking, since coriander is in the regional spice mix, that I'm also going to put a few of the little ball seeds of coriander in the oil, because that's a nice pop of flavor when you've got a stew or something like that. We're going to go over to the saute pan now. This is 2 tablespoons full of olive oil, and here are some of the coriander seeds. You can tell how much I like it because the jar is almost empty. I'm just going to put some in there. They'll eventually pop as they roast. And it says to saute the onions first and then the garlic. So I'm going to put the onions in. Here's that little base of the onion. I don't think I want that in. Saute till translucent. There's my garlic, just went in. They wanted me to put some parsley stems in with the cooking chickpeas, but I didn't have parsley stems. So I wouldn't put a green herb in the hot oil, but I will put it in when I put the stock in. I'm just going to put dried parsley. Get that going a little bit there. Now all these dried spices, they would go really well in the oil. That's going to help unleash some of their flavors. And all of the half teaspoons that were called for in the recipe, I think would equal 1 tablespoonful of this. So it might be a little really tasty. But I'm excited to try this spice combination. This recipe also calls for 4 cups of stock, and this is unchickened vegetarian stock. This is only 2 cups, so it's a very concentrated stock, and what I'll do is I'll add 2 cups of water to it, because this is my largest measure. But once I put it in my soba pot, I'll decide how many more cups of water I'm going to add. I don't know that I can add 8 cups of water plus 2 cups of chickpeas plus a cup of lentils. I don't know if it will all fit in my soba pot. You know how to deglaze your saucepan from cooked on oil is you put a water-based element in it, like a balsamic vinegar or your stock. So this is already coating the pan. The spices are coating the pan. And that's fine. That means they're cooking, they're roasting. But when I do this, we're going to hear shh and probably see some steam. But that is going to deglaze the pan. You see how shiny the pan is afterwards? It's taking all those flavored oils and that have roasted in the olive oil, those flavored spices that have roasted in the olive oil, and it's just made them into like a broth now. Perhaps this could have sauteed longer. I'm turning it off, and I'm going to put everything into my soba pot. If you're using a slow cooker like an old-fashioned crock pot, you should saute anything of your ingredients that are sauteable, like mushrooms or onions or garlic, with some of your spices, because certain flavors are stronger if they're sauteed than if they're just boiled. And basically a stew is being cooked in water, so it's kind of boiled. I'm going to add the chickpeas, the lentils. That's a cup of lentils. I could use some of my super duper cooked chickpeas, but I'm doing the 21st century method. It calls for a 15-ounce can of chickpeas. That doesn't look quite like 2 cups. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'll add a few more. I definitely need 2 more cups of stock and a little salt and pepper, and I'm going to put some of that parsley in. So even though I've used the full amount of chickpeas and lentils, right now I only have half the amount of water in. It would called for 4 cups of stock and 4 cups of water. I'm a little nervous about doing that. I think it just might be too thin. I'm going to add my salt and pepper now. This is sea salt, which is probably very much like what they had. And it called for 2 teaspoons. Oh my goodness. Here's 1 teaspoon. And some pepper. What fell off the counter there? The lid to my coriander. And I'm going to open this parsley jar and put in some nice green parsley. My one concern about this soup is that it's all going to be tan. And I kind of cook by color, so I don't know if I'm going to need to saute a couple little bits of red pepper or a fresh tomato and cut it in at the very end. This is all the ingredients that go in this soup. And then I'm going to cover it up with my lid here. My oven, which has been acting very dodgy lately, is supposedly set for 350. Let's see if it's really at 350. Look at that. It says it's at 350. Oh, it's actually at 335. But I'm going to put my soba pot right into it for an hour. Can you take a look at that?
Yeah, no, I got it.
Okay. The oven was broken last week too. I tell you, it's an old house. Everything's falling apart. And I'm going to use my soaked and cooked chickpeas probably for some hummus. And if I feel that I need any more chickpeas in that stew and any more stock, I've got some chickpeas as a backup. It's just, I love chickpeas. I could eat them for breakfast, and I may be eating these for breakfast. I have a lot of chickpeas. Okay, we'll check it in an hour and see if it's actually edible and tasty. Well, I pulled this out of the oven after about an hour and 15 minutes. It smells really good. And this is what it looks like. The aroma is amazing. And I know the chickpeas are soft. The lentils still feel a little tiny bit al dente. And what I will do is, instead of leaving this in the oven, I'll probably add a little more water to it. I'm going to cover it up and let it's sterile at this point, and I'll let it sit on the stove overnight. I'll check the lentils in the morning. And maybe I'll just reheat it. Anyway, feast that Jesus might have eaten. This is the lentil and chickpea soup. Mike is serving our lentil and chickpea soup, which cooked on the top of the stove for just another hour. We wanted to make sure those lentils were cooked. Oh, that's plenty for me. And here you have it. Maybe the kind of lunch that Jesus might have eaten, or a first century family. I would serve this with some of the flatbread, some of the unleavened bread. I didn't have time to put that together. This was fun. I hope you make it.